Hey, gang, welcome to our week in review. So it has been less than 1 week since the Senate voted to acquit Donald Trump, which has led to a civil war in the GOP, one that has reached our borders here in Washington in the form of Jamie Herrera Butler and Lauren Culp. So to talk about all of this and what it means, we have Will Casey. He's the former communications director for the Washington State Democrats and is now the managing partner for Left Wing Digital. Hello, Will.
Hey, Stefan. Always thankful to be here.
Well, it's going to be a permanent thing, man. I should just let people know we're going to be doing this every week. So, yeah, you're on board. We're doing it. Shasti Conrad is the chair of the King County Democrats. And hello to you, Shasti.
Hello. Great to be with you again.
So as I am reading this intro, I'm thinking, is anybody else having trouble getting your head around the fact that the impeachment trial was less than a week ago? It was like 6 days ago. Doesn't it seem like forever?
Yeah.
Or like, did it even happen? Like, it feels like, what, is it just a mirage?
That is heartbreaking. Yeah, that's the probably the harder pill to swallow. I guess I thought that once we were past the era of Trump, that the days wouldn't be as long, but they are. Also, I was pleasantly surprised, I don't know about you guys, that the media mostly got Jamie Herrera Butler's name right. Yeah, no Beutlers, no Butlers. Yeah.
Well, I mean, she did a historic thing. She was, showed some spine for the first time in her political career. So, we got to give her a little bit of credit where it's due.
We will talk all about that. So let's just talk about the acquittal to start with. So as we know, 7 Republicans voted to convict. This was mostly this is the most bipartisan impeachment vote in history. But, this was just an airtight case. We know that the other 43 had to have known that Trump was guilty, but they voted to acquit. Shasti, I'll just ask you bluntly, what do you make of that?
It was jaw drop, right? Look, facts don't matter to Republicans anymore. And the fact that we are even having to treat the Republican Party as folks who want to be actively engaged in democracy it's a farce. And, I think we have to stop treating them as equal opponents who are worthy of our time and energy, because they are not. They don't care. They are completely fine with being there to block any progress. They will take care of their own. They've thrown completely in with Trumpers, and we have to stop trying to find some, golden, I don't know, like put Mitt Romney on the platform and say, like, there's some hope. Nope. It's not going to happen. It's not going to come from them. We have to it's the only work that's ever going to get done is on our side of the aisle.
Yeah, Will, what are your thoughts generally about that? It seems like we have a system right now that incentivizes all the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
And I'll ask you about the vote to acquit. And also, what do you make of McConnell voting to convict and then giving this speech on the Senate floor directly after about how basically Trump was guilty?
It's not great, Stefan. It's really not great. It's the only thing that we can do in this circumstances is take them at their word, right? I am so tired, and I think the rest of the country, honestly, is so tired at Republicans trying to play this game with the DC press corps where they, say like, oh, they make these mouth noises about how, Trump is bad and he bears responsibility, but they act as if they believe in conspiracy theories, right? And I think that it's time for us to start living by the maxim that, we believe who they are when they show us the first time. So I think that trying to reverse engineer the strategy of people like McConnell is only reinforcing this narrative that politics is a game and that Congress is just reality television. And it's not. This is real people's lives, right? In this particular instance, it's the lives of everyone who was at the Capitol that day, not just, the members themselves, but their staff, the Capitol staff, who are nonpartisan, just trying to provide security, our Capitol police officers, several of whom have died as a result of their injuries in that attack. It's reality here, and what we've seen is that when rubber meets the road, the Republican Party can't be counted on to act like they want to belong in our democracy.
So yes to all that, absolutely. And so then let's talk about Jamie Herrera Butler, because I think a lot of people were very surprised by what she did. First, by voting to impeach, but then also being one of the few Republicans in Congress to vote to impeach. But then also, she was willing to testify. It was just kind of one of those things that, like, I woke up on Saturday morning, I'm like, huh, who, what? Like, the whole world heard of Jamie Herrera Butler for the first time. So I don't know. The thing that keeps going through my mind is given everything you have both just said about, the way that we have a political system that incentivizes Republicans to do the wrong thing, what do we think is motivating her? Why did she do this? Will, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I should start off by saying I'm the furthest person from objective when it comes to Jamie Herrera Butler, right? I mean, I worked for her opponent in 2018 in the general election as her comms director. I was, comms director of the party when she was our top target this past cycle. And so, being clear about my lack of objectivity on this issue, still, it is obviously apparent and frustrating that she's doing this just because it's her own, political interest, right? I mean, she saw that, the most populous county in her district, Clark County, was carried by Joe Biden. She understands she needs at least some votes of people who rejected the president's, toxic ideology and failed presidency to keep her job personally. And at the same time, there's no coalition supporting her, right? I mean, she cannot be more transparently sort of, political about this. She allegedly wrote in Paul Ryan in 2016 instead of voting for Trump. And then, a fact that gets left out of all of these glowing, soft focus profiles of her in the wake of this, moment is that she publicly committed to voting for the president again in 2020 after seeing how terrible he was in office, right? And so, the only thing here is that she just had to have thought that this was in her self-interest. And I think the fact that you've seen, corporate America, who are the people who keep her in office, sort of say that they're going to withhold donations to folks who are questioning the, integrity of our elections, is the best signal you can interpret sort of her, or the best motivation you can interpret her actions for. But I mean, honestly, she did the least she could possibly do at the last possible moment, and it was still, something that was incredibly disappointing.
So you're saying follow the money? Am I getting that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, right. It's always the case with Jamie Herrera Butler.
Well, Shasta, you're probably not going to let her off the hook either, right?
Hell no. I was just thinking, there's a saying, it's like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, it's like, if an impeachment trial happens and like 7 barely relevant, Republicans like support it, like, does it even matter? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, and it's so frustrating. I think, to Will's point, like, we have to stop being shocked by Republicans not doing what is best for the country, like what is best for their constituents, like what is best for democracy. We have to stop thinking that, like, again, like I said earlier, like some saving grace, because it keeps happening. I've been working through Obama's book, A Promised Land, and there's a really key passage in there where he talks about he's sort of reflecting back on like those early lessons, and which, I was around in the first term, and that Affordable Care Act fight like taught me a lot, because we wasted so much time thinking that we could get something that the Republicans would support, that we could get bipartisan support for, that we could really we could find that silver bullet, and, America would all come together. And it's like, no, the American public they want progressive policies. They want, gun reform and accountability. They want healthcare. They want accountability for Trump. They don't want to have to face off against insurrectionists and white supremacists. That is clear. The vast majority of Americans agree. The Republican Party continues to block any type of progress on those things. And we have to stop pretending like anything's going to be different. It's like being in a bad relationship. Like you just keep trying to okay, but this time it's going to be different. I say the right thing, I bring the right gift, I wear my hair different. And we know it never changes. The only thing that changes is you get out of that bad relationship and you put your own boundaries in place, and you walk out to a Shaka Khan theme song and you go I'm a badass. I'm not playing this game anymore. Let me go find a new friend. And, that new friend is led by the AOCs and the Squad and, Mondaire Jones and Jamal Bowman. It's Cori Bush. We got to go get in and throw in with that in that space and focus on really supporting awesome progressive people and stop being shocked by the Jamie Herrera Butlers and like trying to turn them into something like they're just not. She failed. She did one vote and then completely dropped it and didn't back it up. So no.
So not a profile in courage, is
No,
what I hear you
no.
say.
She should not be getting the JFK award this year or any year, and does not get to come home to Washington to any kind of big fanfare. I'm sorry, but no.
Okay, well, fair enough. And, honestly, there has been so much ink and, zeros and ones spilled about the notion that Americans really want progressive policies. And I think the three of us should do an entire show just about that and how you will, being the communications master that you are, how we get that message out to people effectively. But that's for another day. Shasti, what you're kind of alluding to is, and you've seen this firsthand, is that the GOP is becoming or has become what it's kind of been on track to become since you first encountered it in the White House with the Tea Party. And in my opinion, really since Goldwater, not that I was old enough to be around for Goldwater, but if you track it back that far, that's really where kind of the seeds of a lot of this come from. So the question is, what do we do? How do we eradicate this, what is ultimately happening with the GOP?
We beat them. We win elections and we make them so that they are an irrelevant, minority, which is something that they've tried to do to us for forever, right? Like we just can't keep trying to, play the same game. And I think Democrats, like we're so used to being the underdog that it's like we get comfortable in losing so that when we're the winners and we have power, we don't know how to wear it. Like we just don't know what to do with that.
Oh my
And,
God, yes. Why
right?
is that? Why? Seriously, why is that?
Listening, it's a simple power analysis. It's like, it takes a lot out of when you're used to getting beat up, right? Like you're used to just taking the hits. It is hard. It takes a lot of time to process through to be like, oh, I'm safe and I'm okay and I can push forward and I can like put something like I'm my own self and I don't need to keep looking for what's coming next. And I think as Democrats, like we're just always afraid that like we're gonna say the wrong thing, we're gonna do the wrong thing, we're gonna, and also that like does winning and getting things done, does that keep me in office? And I think for some of these people, it's easier to have the like, well, I have to stay in because we're still fighting this battle that we've been fighting for 40 years and like, nobody else understands it. So we had that even here in Washington State where they pulled back somebody who had retired because he was the only one who could help with the budget this year. And, it's like, come on. And I think also, I think it's sort of funny, but it's really emblematic, which is like what Chris Coons said about like, we just want to get back for our Valentine's Day, like celebrations. We don't want to be here to do the work. And it's because they're so disconnected from the public. They're connected from people's plights, like the actual pain and suffering that people are going through. That like the only thing it's just another day job, right? So like even though you have the power, losing to the Republicans is just like business as usual. So it's like switching that over like doesn't matter. You get paid the same amount, right? If whether you lose or you win, and in some of these districts, we're not challenging some of these folks who are not delivering. So I don't know. I think we've got to come in with fresh energy. And I think the people that are doing that are like, the sort of millennial folks of color who are just like, I don't want to keep losing. Like this doesn't work. And we really have to follow that energy because otherwise we're going to lose the House and the Senate in 2022 if we're not careful.
Agreed. And I think progressives absolutely have the right idea on this one. Even when we're in the majority, we have this mentality like we're in the minority. And so basically, if we win, we do it with such force that we basically make the GOP become whatever the opposite of neoliberal is. What do you make of that? What do you think?
I mean, I think Shasti is exactly right. I think the only way forward is through, right? Like this is a situation where we have to acknowledge the fact that there's lots of work that should have been done over the last 40 years that hasn't been done. And just when you know, are only making the minimum payment on your credit cards, if you really want to get clear of that debt, it's going to be painful and difficult, and it's going to require some sort of drastic action, right? And so I think that this situation is really something where our representatives are responding to what they feel as a really real threat, that all of the districts in the House, for example, are subject to gerrymandering. And so, you know, we could lose the House in 2022 just by the fact that the Republicans redraw lines in a bunch of states where they didn't do as well as we did here in Washington, preserving or, gaining ground in the state legislature. And so I think, the only way that we can get through this is if we force the Republicans to compete in a fair and free election. And that requires passing the For the People Act. That's H.R. 1, which would do a number of things to help clean up our elections that are vastly overdue, but most importantly, would require independent, nonpartisan commissions to draw these district boundary lines. And, in states like North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, these are competitive states at the statewide level, Georgia, for example. And, the Republicans are capturing a majority of those seats simply because they're able to rig the game, the rules of the game. And we just can't tolerate that any longer. But of course, that requires limiting the filibuster, which, is yet another topic we should visit in an entirely separate show.
And we will. Absolutely. Yeah. Here's something that I actually would love to get your thoughts, both of your thoughts on, and it's not in the notes. It's just something that is occurring to me. Is there a way for Democrats right now to exploit this GOP civil war that is happening right now? Shasti, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely. There have been periods where the Democratic Party has been, very inward focused on figuring out, what direction we were going to go in. And the Republicans have always exploited that. And I think for us, it's like we should let them fall into this like gross chaos that they of their own making, and like let them battle it. And like not like just don't shine a light on, like it's not our battle. Like our focus has to be on getting this country moving forward. We still have, I think we're nearing almost 500,000 deaths from COVID. And, we've got eviction moratoriums that are coming up. And so like people are suffering. It's our job to like focus there. Like Will is saying on like things like HR 1, which is like would completely reform democracy. And, it's like, we enjoy, right? It's like eating popcorn and watching like the gladiator spectacle of what's happening in the Republican Party. But we should treat it like it is, which is gross and like a schoolyard fight that isn't ours to take on. It's like, hey, that's their baggage, like let them keep it. And let us just stay focused on what people need. That's why I'm a part of the Democratic Party, is because what I always was told and what I truly believed was that we were about people. We were about all people. We were about actually doing, it's why we believe in government, because we think government should be there to care for people when they're struggling, like if that we are a full society and community that supports each other. Look at what's happening in Texas right now,
Yeah.
like the government, like we shouldn't have mutual aid that's run off of like random people's phone banking or like social media campaigns. That should be government's response. And that's what the Democrats should be focused on. And the Republicans just like don't get to come to the part, like they don't get to be a part of it if they're gonna fight like this. And if they're gonna, throw in like, Joshua Freed, who's the, chair of King County GOP, right? Like his battle right now is fighting on, Twitter and then saying that like we're mad at Jamie Herrera Butler, who barely did anything, and like let's go protest the governor's mansion. Like, sorry, but fuck off. Like, just go. Like, you don't get to play. You don't like take your toys, go someplace else. And Democrats have to stop being like, oh, but like let's pay attention to how they're playing with their toys. Like, no, we've got we've massive crises on our hand that the Democratic Party is the best to to take up, because we're supposed to be about caring for people. So that's where we have to keep our focus.
Will, I see you nodding a lot. Focus on people, focus on governing, stay away from the GOP in disarray kind of stories. And, I'll just ask you, with that dynamic, how do you see the Republicans, let's just call it the Civil War, how do you see that playing out here in Washington?
Well, I mean, it's over, right? Like the Trumpists have won. And I think that's the really the true telling here is that we have to continue to drive the narrative that, while we are helping people, these folks are engaged in this culture war nonsense, right? I mean, like it's all fine and well and good to, focus about, or to have basically an entire platform of letting your supporters eat tweets when you're coasting off of the Obama economy. It's another thing when you can't provide power to, people who are almost, and sometimes in cases literally, freezing to death in Texas, right? And don't have the luxury of fleeing to Cancun for the weekend until other people can get back to work fixing the mess that you created,
Ted Cruz. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that there is some utility, though, in bringing some light. And I mean, I say this as somebody who spent a lot of the last year and a half of my life trying to drive coverage on this issue. But the Republican strength has always been that they are a monolithic coalition, right? They don't have the same coalition politics to do that we have to engage in because, we are effectively, a coalition of people who are coming together because individually, none of our interests can, win the day. But as a collective, we can actually hold power and are. But Republicans, have those structural advantages until we take them away from them. And as Joshua Freed said when he was running for governor in a spectacularly failure of a campaign, this issue of having to confront domestic terrorism in their own ranks was a grenade that we rolled into the room, and they were the ones who pulled the pin, right? Like they're going to do this to themselves. We just have to make sure that we stay unified in our opposition to that level of support for, frankly, what is, domestic terrorism, right? Like we cannot let this story go. We always have to remind people that there was one party who wanted there to be a democracy, and there was another party that didn't care if it continued or not, as long as they held power, right? And the reason that is important is the things that Chastity is saying, right? We need to be able to deliver them healthcare, reliable power, renewable energy, direct economic relief in terms of the COVID package. We're the ones who are now managing the vaccine rollout. Could you imagine if Trump was just like letting vaccine doses spoil on shelves right now? It would be the most irritating and frustrating and just enraging story that we'd be seeing every single day. But instead, the Biden administration is well on track to exceed their goal of 100 million doses in their first 100 days, right? That is the difference that good governance makes. And we need to be screaming that story from the rooftops for the next 2 years, while also pointing out that, the Republican Party, they're not interested in being governing partners. They just want to be on reality television.
Yeah, it's about grievance politics. And we have those people right here at home, right? We have Lauren Culp, for example, who has been really taking a page right out of Trump's playbook. He's doing his own Ignite the Right rally in April. We'll talk a little bit about this because I know you've been tracking this very closely. This all sounds vaguely familiar. What do we do as activists to kind of position ourselves in opposition to what's happening here?
Well, I mean, I think we have to be very clear about the consequences of this type of, performative politics, right? Like the last time that there was they called it the Unite the Right rally back in 2017, when Heather Heyer was run down by a white supremacist driving a truck into a crowd and died, right? Like this is not a game. I mean, I don't know how many different ways we can say that same message, but that is the thing that people need to understand about this. And I think that the thing that people don't entirely get on our side of the aisle, because we are solution minded and we are trying to come up with ways to fix things because we actually look at and see the suffering in the world and want to, reduce or eliminate it, is that they have convinced this, the people who live in this bubble of propaganda are convinced that nothing can ever get better, right? They are convinced that as long as the world is going to be terrible anyway, we might as well have some sort of psychic reward for watching other people suffer more, right? And that is that sort of beggaring of our politics that, folks like Rush Limbaugh, who no one should be, waxing poetic about this week, made possible my entire lifetime, right? It's the reason we haven't solved any of these problems since the 90s. And I think that this is something that we need to stress over and over again, is that, in we've let these things crumble as much as we can, and now people are paying the real price in their lives. But it can get better, right? And it's this narrative that they're selling that sort of, we're doomed no matter what. It's up to you to make sure you get your part of whatever is left at the end, is just frankly not true in a country that has, come up with multiple vaccines that have never been developed this quickly, that are stopping a worldwide pandemic and are distributing it effectively, right? Like, we are making a real difference in people's lives right now. And that's the message we need to be carrying to people, is that, like, even on above like any particular specific, individual policy issue, that like it's possible for things to get better, right? Like this is a lie that you're being told, and we need to help them sort of walk back from that brink.
Well, I mean, Will, you're the communications expert. Shasti, I'm wondering how this is landing with all of you, how all this is landing with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Will's right on. But I also think, I often look at this from, I studied sociology in college, and so I come at it from a perspective where, you have to look at like the human part of the experience that we're having at a macro level. And, it's hard. I've been really challenged lately about, we're having all these, really important conversations around like diversity and equity and inclusion. But it also means that I think that we are sometimes like we're pushing people into these different silos. And instead of like, at times I think, the folks that are leading like the insurrection, we shouldn't forgive them, right? It's not like a blanket like, hey, that wasn't good, you should be nicer. But I think we have to look and understand them as people that are not, it's not just economic anxiety, right? This is like, this is generations of feeding off of white supremacy being baked into what it is to be American, what it is to be strong, what it is to have a very male patriarchal perspective, is that this is baked in. This kind of, rah, if I'm not getting what I want, then everything is broken. Like it's all about me. We have to treat those folks with some compassion, in that as our side gains more power, as more people of color move into leadership roles, as younger people move into leadership roles, as more women move into leadership roles, these people are losing power. And like, as we were just talking about earlier, I think like Will just ran through amazing successes that are happening under a new Democratic, administration. And we need to be spending more time doing exactly what Will just did, talking about that. But as we were just saying about how Democrats are having a hard time being able to understand how to operate with power, we also have to give some, not space exactly, but like that Republicans don't know how to lose power gracefully. And I'm saying it as nicely as I can.
Yes, you're doing fine.
Compassionate. Thank you. I'm trying to be compassionate. And that, like, when you think about it within like your own family, like, I meet people all the time who are just like, what do I do? Like my father has gone into QAnon and is like, in these spaces, I think when we talk about the Republican Party, we can say like, no, we're not going to spend more time analyzing that because it's a mess and we need to get back to work. But on a human level, we can't dismiss other humans who we are trying to hold into the, knitted fabric of American society. And so human to human, we have to spend a little bit of effort in trying to say, okay, your behavior is not okay. We are going to hold you accountable. There are massive boundaries being put that are absolute, like, you need to be punished for what you've done. But here are the steps with which you as a human, if you can change, we have to leave room for change. You are allowed back into the space if if you take these steps. And we have to, like, it sucks because it means as Democrats, we always have to be the adults in the room, but
Right.
it is the reality with which that it just is. And so we have to be in our parent consciousness and say, like, okay, did you take the punishment? Do you understand what you did was wrong? Now, like, how do we enter you back into this space? And that there are ways you can win too, but you have to come and play on you have to be on our team. You have to come and play in a space that we're in. And we have to, I think that's how we have to think about some of this stuff too.
It's such you're explaining it so well, and it's such a heavy lift, and I hear people, I can feel the resistance to the idea, and so and it isn't because you didn't explain it or lay it out with compassion, but I wonder, Will, I'm gonna kind of don a cynical hat here and say, is there a practical end to this approach of doing this sort of one-on-one work that Shasti is talking about?
Yeah, because I think what people need to understand is that the people who deserve to be canceled are the elected officials who are, profiting themselves personally off of misleading people into this grievance politics where they are having a need met, right? They're having a need met. That need is to feel like a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of identity in this opposition. Because again, they're starting from this premise that things can never get better, and so I might as well, make sure that I'm getting mine, right? And I think that is ultimately like a very morally empty and bankrupt appeal that people turn to and are sort of not they're encouraged by because they feel lonely and isolated and hopeless already, right? Again, this is not economic anxiety. This is decades, arguably generations of Republican politicians failing to bring the kind of resources and development to their communities so that they can feel like there is a thriving place for them in a future that includes everyone. And that is what our messaging has always been about as Democrats, right? We don't leave people out. And so we have to take that into our personal lives and say, listen, like, I'm not excusing your behavior. I want you to know the ways that your behavior has hurt me and how the distance between, that uncle who you unfriended on Facebook or that cousin or sister or friend who you've cut out of your life, and make them aware that their absence is making you worse off too. And I think that is that, like, listen, the only way through for us as a democracy is to make sure that everyone from the grassroots all the way to the elected officials understands that adopting this type of toxic white supremacist ideology gets you excommunicated, right? Like, there is no place in society for these people, right? Like, I have no sympathy, not even a single ounce of compassion for Josh Hawley, right? He knows what he's doing. He's actively making it harder and actively making it more dangerous for people to engage in democracy. That's happening in Republican state legislatures across the country. But individual people who we know, those people are gettable, right? Because they didn't have a very firm attachment to politics in the first place. That's how they were sort of lured into believing this. And it is, a psychological sort of, warping that happens. But there's no way to deprogram people from this, cult-like following at scale. It has to happen in one-on-one situations. And, not every single one of those things is going to work right. Just like every time you phone bank somebody and try to get them out to vote, not everyone picks up your call, and not everyone stays on the phone. Not everyone some people hang up on you, right? But it's as each one of us does this over and over and over and over again, that cumulative effort can have a healing effect on our society, right? Like, we have to be the change here. And this is something that, is about carrying a message of hope and optimism if people are willing to sort of take that first step and meet you, not even halfway, but just 10% of the way. Right? To say that, I am sorry for the way that I have made you feel. And you might not get that, but it's at least worth trying. And the fact that we believe that it is worth trying, that's what makes us, more altruistically minded than the Republicans.
I would love to hear people sound off on this idea. And so if you have thoughts about this, put it in the chat bar. I would love to hear feedback on this, because you both make a very compelling case. It's food for thought. Okay, so this has been a lot. So why don't we end on something fun? So let's talk about something that brought each of us joy. I would say spark joy, but I'm afraid that I would get into some copyright issues. So we'll actually, Shasta, let's start with you. What is something that gave you joy this week?
Well, I think, definitely the progress on the vaccine, sort of distribution. What started out as, kind of being a little messy. Seems like it's been going well, and I'm really happy to report that my mom, who many people have heard me talk about before, who has chronic kidney disease and goes to dialysis 3 times a week, she got the vaccine on Monday. And it was, yeah, and then like, and I just, again, like on the human point perspective, like I didn't fully know, I didn't fully connect with how much stress and anxiety thinking about my mom's safety was really weighing on me. And although, it was the first dose, knowing that in a month she'll have the second dose, and that will hopefully protect her for the foreseeable future. Like all of a sudden I was like, oh. And also I had this feeling of like we did it. Like I was able to help keep her alive for a year. And I'll get emotional if I go into it too deeply, but I like how much that pressure has been weighing at, like, you don't know, like, you don't, and I just think about on the macro of how many of our fellow, Americans have been feeling that or have been grieving. Many people know I lost my uncle, not to COVID, but I lost him in April of last year. And, like, that grief was overwhelming, and nearly 500,000 of our fellow citizens have been feeling that for the last year, and now we're trying to keep ourselves safe. So the joy part of it is that, like, I think we can all take a deep breath as we go through this process, and like Will said earlier, that the Biden administration is doing such a better job than what a Trump administration could ever even. They wouldn't have invested in it because it was fake. So it just feels a lot better, and I feel really excited about that, and it's been great to see, like, people posting on social media, like, I got the vaccine, or my parents got it, and I'm feeling better. That's really exciting to see that.
I'm so happy for both you and your mom, and please send her our love. And I will just dovetail on what you're saying. My septuagenarian parents are also getting their second jab today, and I couldn't be more excited. My dad has been having some health issues, and it is that worry that you talk about. I mean, I've lain awake at night thinking about that very thing, and it's just like, can we just please get through to the point where, we can, get a vaccine in them so that if they get it, they're going to make it. The amount of relief that I am just about to feel at 1:00 today is just immeasurable. I will also mention, on kind of a frivolous note, that I got a new treadmill and it came with iFit. Do you guys know what this is?
No.
Do you know what iFit is? Okay, so basically it's got videos that kind of, because it's a treadmill, it's a lot of runners, and they was, okay, we're going to run through. I haven't been able to travel in over a year. I usually travel overseas like twice a year with my mom, and we haven't been able to travel, and I'm just itching. So far, I've been to Iceland, I've been to Croatia, I've been to Tokyo, I've been to Portugal. And honestly, there's something in your brain when you're running these things. You're like, oh my God, I'm in Split, Croatia. This is fantastic. So if I can't travel, I'm going to exercise my way across the world. So that is what's given me joy. And Will, what's giving you joy this week, man?
Well, now mine's going to sound incredibly petty and mean.
After that, I just said the iPad thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. So I'll start off with saying I do understand people, because I saw a couple of folks jump into the comments saying that like they're not going to make up with Republicans, and I totally understand that. It is hard and it takes a lot, and it's something that that everyone has had so much asked of them for the last year and a half that I can understand this feels like a bridge too far. But I mean. And I realized that this is not a bar I want to hold everyone else to, but I was able to work with some, folks who were walking away from being a part of a white supremacist militia that was supporting an active domestic terrorist, and sat across from them in a Starbucks for 2.5 hours in Spokane to get information that we needed to help expose, Matt Shea and his sort of like circle of ne'er-do-wells here in Washington State. And so, it's not fun. Like, I'm not trying to say this is going to be a pleasant experience, but you can do it, and it does make a positive difference. And it might not be, at that level of scale, but in your own life, it can have some measure of gratification. And so my personal gratification is going to come from something that's a little bit more schadenfreude than either of the two of you. But at least there's one grifting Republican who's finally facing some accountability in Washington State. And that's Tim Eyman, who just this week was, found to have the largest individual judgment, I think, in campaign finance litigation history, with like $2.6 million he now has to pay to the state for his just complete disregard for the rule of law and our campaigns, and has been barred from managing the sort of kickback schemes that he could, that has been kept him afloat ever so. It wasn't his chair theft that got him finally in trouble with the law, but always enjoy a good press release from Bob Ferguson that tells us that something good is happening in the world.
I was going to say, watch out, office chairs everywhere, because Tim Eyman is broke, so he's coming for you. Oh my goodness. Also, by the way, Circle of Ne'er-do-Wells, if that's not a band, it should be, right? That's a fantastic name. All right, you guys, that is it for this week in review. Thank you, Will Casey.
Thank you, Stefan. Always happy to be here.
And thank you, Shasti Conrad.
Thank you, Stefan. Thanks, Will.
All right, gang. See you next week. Bye.